So the business had always revolved around my dad in terms of his positioning on the factory floor. And I thought that's what I needed to do. And I quickly realised that I can't be him, I have to be me. And then I figured the best thing I could do is step out of the way of all the things that I don't know and find people who I can surround myself with who do know those things. And that came from a place of really sincere going like, I actually don't know what I'm doing.
Tanya Van Der Water grew up on construction sites, using her charm to sell her dad's leather tool belts. Did it matter that she didn't know anything about carpentry? Not really. But what about a decade further down the line, when she stepped into the CEO role at Buckaroo Belts? Turns out that not sharing her father's old-school, solitary, craftsman-like approach to business might have actually been her best shot at saving Buckaroo. I'm Kelly Reardon and this is Curveball, the show where great leaders let you in on how they overcome trying times. If Tanya Van Der Water's father taught her anything, it was about the power of passion in tough times. He started his own leatherworks company after moving to Australia from South Africa, but it almost disappeared as the market shifted dramatically. But before even that, the Van Der Waters were a black family living in apartheid-era South Africa. Welcome, Tanya.
Hey Kelly, thanks for having me.
Your father started Buckaroo in South Africa but had to flee the country. What was life like for your family in South Africa at that time?
So I wasn't born yet. So I was born once they landed here in Australia. But at that time, as you can imagine, for anyone experiencing the difficulties with something as major as, apartheid, there was a real desperate want for my parents to leave South Africa and start a life with their very young family at the time. It was my older brother and sister who were a baby and a toddler. They wanted to start a new life for themselves in a country that they felt was safe and would give them opportunity, of which at that point in time, South Africa just wasn't able to offer them.
And what did their day-to-day life look like at that time?
I'm told these very generalised, broad stories. My parents really made a decision once they arrived in Australia to basically erase South Africa from their memories. So that, has been difficult for us growing up with a foot in both camps, so to speak. Having the South African heritage growing up in Australia. For us as children, that was still is a little bit tricky to navigate through. But my dad had leatherwork as a trade. So he was just a one-man, operation in South Africa doing leather work. He previously had worked as a cost and works accountant at Samsonite. But coming into Australia, he was able to say that his professional trade at that point in time was leather work, which would be laughed upon now if you think about it. But that was how he arrived in Australia, with a sense of being able to hit the ground running with a business or a skill.
And what are your earliest memories of your father, Ken, and his relationship to leatherworking? Like, what do you remember growing up and how he treated his craft?
So there was a backyard shed before I was born, and it was literally a backyard shed. So when he operated from the rumpus room of the house that my parents built, that was a huge step up. That was like having a real professional organisation, But even so, it was always just him and one other person in that rumpus room. And it was just very much a staple part of our house.
And what were they doing? Are they making belts? Are they making shoes?
Yeah, all the traditional leather craft stuff. Everything that now you see coming from China is what my dad was making, 35 years ago. So sandals, belts, little handicraft items, wallets, handbags, lots of repairs. People got things repaired back then. They paid money to have their handbag fixed, to have their shoes repaired.
And then you entered the family business when you were about 18, and I don't think you really wanted to go into the business. How did you envisage your role would be within the company?
I didn't envisage anything at that point in time. I was kind of convinced to give it a go by the boyfriend that I had at that time, who is actually now my husband. And he said he'd also grown up in a family business, and he said, look, I actually had a bit of a disconnected relationship with my dad at that point in time. And so, yeah, his encouragement for me was just give it a go and see what you think, but you'll only ever know, if you try it. If you don't try it, you'll have no idea. And at that point in time too, guilt was something that definitely was plaguing my daughter brain. And I wanted to reconnect with my dad, and a big part of it was actually feeling sorry for him. My brother and my sister had both turned down whatever offers may have come their way from him to join the business. So I was sort of the last one standing. And I had a relationship with him of which was I was pretty desperate to get his validation and love and approval.
How did the dynamic between you and your dad, who's this real craftsman, you're an 18-year-old upstart, not even sure you want to be in the business, how did that dynamic work between the two of you when you got started in the business?
Oh, like I was guns blazing. Like I went in there going like, I know way more than you. Like I'm this young, hot shot that has all this energy, and, you're really old school and traditional. And I mean, we butted heads from day one. I think I strategically took on what I knew would be the best role for me in the business at that time, which was branding, marketing, telling the story. My dad took on what was best for him, which was in the factory, making the products. And so we actually ended up being quite a good team. But when we had to cross paths, oh yeah, like you didn't want to be in the way. It was like the older bull trying to go against the younger bull and just clashing of the horns like all the time.
And then you also used to go around to work sites, as I understand, and he'd drop you off. What was your job there?
Yeah, it was like ridiculous. So he used to like drop me off at building sites, go to the pub, like leave me there by myself, go to the pub, and then I'd have to be all touchy-feely with these tradies, putting tool belts on them, trying to get them to buy our products. Like it was nuts. Like I was wearing high heels.
and also, I think we need to point out, so what era is this? This is like the early 90s?
So this is probably like very early 2000s. So this is 20 plus years ago.
And you are a woman going into a very male-dominated industry. Like work sites are just full of men. You're a black woman.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So what was that like?
I was known as the young, hot Islander girl, even though I'm not Islander. But going in with that meant that I could get in with the Islander crew because they were dominating all the big building sites at the time. And, and I wasn't a woman, I was a girl. I mean, I was a young 18-year-old, and I was doing what I thought was the right thing to do, which was flirting with these guys. And we had a very new product. So the best way that I could sell at that point in time was to sell myself. Sell my personality, sell the way I could connect with them, sell, okay, I'm of colour, so I can fit in with the Islander crew, whoever it might be, the South American crews, whatever. And that was how we sold product. And I would do what we sort of do now with influencers when you're looking at social media. I'd do that in person on building sites, and I'd see all the really hot guys. There weren't a lot of girls. There weren't any girls on site at that point in time. I'd always see the hot guys and I'd give them a belt for free. And then I'd go back the following week and I'd visit and I'd get some feedback. And then before you knew it, they were the ones that everyone else was looking at. And then everyone else would want to buy a belt because that leader on that site had a Buckaroo belt.
Did you feel some pressure? Like what happened if you didn't sell enough belts that day or that week?
So, this is the way that my brain was and still is to this day a bit wired, is that, I seek approval, I seek acceptance, I want to be validated, I want to be adored, I want to make sure that whatever it is that I'm doing, the people around me appreciate me. And I wasn't going to stop until I sold all the belts that I could. So for me, failing wasn't an option. Like it never, ever was. And so I would just push it, work my ass off, do whatever needed to be done. But the pressure was definitely something that was put on me from me. My dad was just happy. He was hand to mouth. He was just happy if he got a couple of $100.
Where does this drive come from then for you?
Well, I didn't understand it back then because I didn't have, the context of therapy. I didn't have the context of understanding the way that I had been developed from childhood, through adolescence and into adulthood. I didn't understand where it came from because I always just saw it as ambition. So I always just thought, well, everyone who's ambitious is like this. And I think it's only been now in recent years that I've realized that, the addictive force for me personally, the thing I was driven to was seeking validation and finding my purpose through doing and having others really give me that sense of my own self-worth and value. But it didn't start with me. It always started with what I was getting from someone else. And so when you're driven in the way that I was, very quickly you can create that bubble for yourself so easily. You can manipulate your world so that that is a constant fill. Just boom, boom, boom. Look at what you're doing. You're amazing. This is great. Like, yeah, more, more, more. And it's a very easy thing to get stuck in the trap of.
You mentioned that some of the islander groups on the sort of work sites were quite interested in you and the belts. And in fact, it was a couple of Maori tradesmen that really changed things for Buckaroo. What happened?
Well, my dad also was seen as an islander and would play on that. Very quickly his favourite rugby union team became the All Blacks, and he all of a sudden started wearing, all black jerseys and whatever. And he definitely had befriended some Maoris of whom were very instrumental in changing the course of his business. The business was meant to die. When the Chinese floodgates opened in the 90s, my dad's business suffered greatly. I mean, it was already very small, but there was no going back to what he was doing before because there just wasn't an opportunity for him to sell and compete against Chinese products. So the diversification for the business came in the form of tradesmen approaching my dad and saying, this is what we'd love to have you build for us. And at first it was a concept of which was really like out there. I mean, tool belts as a product, it's all about how low it hangs, how old it looks. You want to kind of be slugging around like a cowboy. And my dad came up with a concept with these Maori fellas that was very much about supporting your back, giving you a brace, having you feel comfortable while also looking good and having a really high quality product. So they allowed for him to experiment with this idea of which in the end became what we're known for today. And then the previous way my dad was doing business became history very quickly.
The belt was quite unique as well because it was customizable. It could be, fitted to a particular person. Did that put you ahead of the Chinese products which are just off the shelf?
Yeah, when we first started making the tool belts, with the gusto that just ended up becoming a perpetual thing, it was very much about how do we capture a part of the market where we're really tapping into the guys on site that want a quality product. The Chinese stuff will always be there. It's not going anywhere. So let's not even try and compete with it. Let's find the customer who is prepared to spend the money, who does want to invest in themselves and their trade, and who will give us the feedback that we want as well. When you're buying stuff for cheap off the shelf, if it breaks, you chuck it in the bin. We needed to hear when things are breaking. We needed to build relationships with tradies who would give us that direct feedback. So that's where the idea sort of came into it with, this is a belt that you can accommodate to suit any trade. And that's what allowed for us to open it up and bring in all these different types of accessories that really were of benefit to lots of different type of workers, not just the one particular one, which was carpenters, who were known for wearing tool belts at the time.
Your working relationship with your father was impacted, though, by his struggles with alcoholism. How did that affect the way that the two of you could work together?
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic between he and I from when I was a very young child to when we were working together and even up until his death 10 years ago, it was always foundationally based on me being the daughter of an alcoholic and what that meant for me as the role that I played in our greater family dynamic. So that was very much taken into our business relationship. That was very much even taken into the relationship we had just before he died. I didn't yet have the understanding that I have today of what that dynamic actually is, where it comes from, and how it could be healed. So, my whole relationship with my dad, unfortunately, was very much revolved around that. It revolved around his disease of alcoholism and the impact that had on me. But never was I given the opportunity to discuss that with him. I just didn't have the sense of it at that time.
Your husband has also battled alcoholism. How have you been able to keep the business and your family afloat while there's this shadow of addiction looming over everything?
Well, I guess it's just one of those things like any, addiction, alcoholism, anything of which is a, complete arrest of someone's brain. It becomes part of the norm of the chaos with how you deal with that person. And as humans, I think we naturally adapt quite quickly to our surroundings. So for me, growing up in that environment, what others wouldn't see as normal or healthy, for me was my normal, was my sense of healthy, was my idea of my purpose in the world, which is to, I watched enabling. So I knew how to enable the addicts and alcoholics, my loved ones in my life. I knew how to rescue. I always thought my purpose in life was to help others help themselves. And I wasn't even in the queue. I was 100 people behind. So I always thought my purpose was about trying to control my world and the world of others around me through the lens of this disease of alcoholism and addiction.
Why do you think you haven't suffered the same fate in a way? Did you make a deliberate choice about the way you would handle alcohol?
No, I think my addictions have come out in different ways. My addictions look more like, falling at the feet of the perception that I can be in control of myself and others. I'm very much drawn to doing things. I struggle to sit still. I have this obsessive brain of which is on a constant loop of what can I do next? What can I achieve next? What can I, what can be my next successful step? It's a constant thing that I have to listen to, accept, and then work through every day. And I'm a believer in the family disease of alcoholism and addiction. I believe that when someone is unwell in a family unit, how it impacts every other person in that unit, how when the healing happens, everyone in that unit needs to heal. And until that can happen, everyone is sick in their own way. Everyone has their own debilitations as a result of their world revolving around the alcoholic or the addict. So, very much for me, even though I never went down that path, I always had this belief that I was better than because I didn't go down that path. Oh, you're the loser doing this and I'm not doing that. And, it's this whole complex beast. Like, it's just unbelievable the depth that goes into what it means to grow up in this environment and how it actually has such a significant impact on the developing brain.
I'm Kelly Reardon and this is Curveball. What happens when Buckaroo Belts owner Tanya Van Der Water steps into the CEO role and has to make some difficult choices to save the company?
I probably killed that business in about 6 months.
This is Curveball, the show about life's messy parts, the things that we have to overcome. Tanya Van Der Water joined the family business Buckaroo when she was just 18, helping her dad sell leather goods and custom-made tool belts. Tanya, you had to step into the top job at Buckaroo, a little earlier than expected. What happened? Why did you have to step in?
At that particular point in time, my dad had been diagnosed with, it was a late diagnosis for prostate cancer. And, his prognosis was a couple of years. He deteriorated quite quickly once they had found the cancer in his body, because it had metastasized, I think it's called, and it had travelled into his bones. So at that particular point in time, I was so unwell in the way that I was living my life. I was very much in denial of the issues that were going on for me. My husband was in full-blown addiction. I had 3 children who were under the age of 3 at the time of when my dad was diagnosed. It was really messy, and the trauma of all of that, and where I'd always found myself heading in times of chaos, was autopilot mode. Like, you're just putting one foot in the other, you're not thinking, you're not present, you're just ticking boxes, you can't give anything to yourself or to the others around you, and you just have to power through. And, it was really hard to be around him. I didn't know how to be around him, actually. It's one of my biggest regrets. I didn't know how to sit in a space with him when I knew that he wouldn't be here for much longer. And so all I did was I threw myself into that business. Because, again, I felt that that was the best thing that I could be doing for him, and I thought it was the right thing that I could be doing for myself. But it was never the plan. I mean, my dad was meant to be living forever. And so when I joined the business and I had kids and I travelled, it was always he was there. He was in the background and he was holding me up when I was able, allowing me to do the things I wanted to do. So very much his passing meant that I had to jump into what was a very unexpected position in managing the business, of which I didn't know how to manage a business. I didn't know anything about business. I just knew how to sell. I just knew how to storytell. I just knew marketing, and I just knew ambition and growth and bigger picture stuff. So jumping into the business was a very difficult challenge for me, much earlier than what I anticipated, at a time of which could not have been worse. And I quickly killed it. I probably killed that business in about 6 months. So, none of it went to plan in terms of how I imagined taking over my family business. None of it was glitz and glamour. But by killing it, it gave me an opportunity to rebuild. And it gave me an opportunity to do something of which I wouldn't have had the opportunity if I hadn't been thrown into that mess of a situation.
So what did you decide to do differently to your father? Where did you take the business next?
So the business had always revolved around my dad in terms of his positioning on the factory floor. And I thought that's what I needed to do. So I'm taking on this business, so I need to stop all the things I'm doing and I need to jump on the factory floor. And I need to pretend that I am now the new 66-year-old man. So I need to do all the things that my dad was doing, blah, blah, blah. And I quickly realised that I can't be him, I have to be me. Like, I can't jump into what he was doing because he's no longer around. I'm jumping into what I now need to do in the way that only I know how to do it, based on my skills, based on what I'm able to bring. And then I figured the best thing I could do is step out of the way of all the things that I don't know and find people who I can surround myself with who do know those things. And that came from a place of really sincere going, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I actually don't know what I'm doing. And I remember it was one of those moments where I sat at the desk with my head in my hands going, I actually don't know what I'm doing. And by that point, the business was already pretty much on the decline. But by doing that and at least saying it out loud, it gave me a chance to find people of whom I could bring into the business that somewhat did know what they were doing. And then I just used to learn from everyone that I had around me. I'd just take little bits and pieces of information, and that's where I developed what is now quite a strong entrepreneurial flair, because from that moment on, I was really brave and I took lots of risks.
One of the massive risks that you took as a leader was to cut more than half of the products from Buckaroo's line. What was the thinking there?
So the business was still very much trying to hold on to this idea of what we'd always done. And that was still some of the products of which were my dad's area of expertise. And moving forward, I just thought this is a massive challenge. We're trying to push ourselves into the future, but still hold on to the past in a way that is actually negatively impacting our manufacturing ability. We're trying to push with this tool belts and all this amazing new innovative product, but we're still trying to hold on to the products of the past. And where it caused conflict was in the staffing arrangements, because we had the old schoolers versus the new schoolers. And in the end, I had to make a decision, which was, what is the best thing for this business's future and how do we move forward with that? And so the idea was, we need to actually eradicate a lot of the products of which we're dragging. They're not pushing us anymore, we're just dragging them behind us. And getting rid of it was like getting rid of a chunk of the past. It was getting rid of a chunk of history and a little bit of my dad. But it was the best decision for the business at that particular point in time, because we were able to, really define who we were and what we did. And that is now where we were able to build a whole new brand for Buckaroo, which was very much centric on tool belts.
What is it like being the female CEO in not just an industry dominated by men, but it's also one that's selling products to other industries that are dominated by men?
Yeah, look, very much the way that I was attuned to be in this world, in terms of seeking acceptance and validation, absolutely was of benefit to the role that I was playing in this business. It meant that I could walk into a room of men and know what I needed to do to get everyone's attention, know what I needed to do to get them to give me what I wanted. Like, I became very good at manipulating because I was already manipulating the world around me. It all became very much a hand-in-hand thing. So I often was the one that was, causing the so-called hissy fits. I was always the one that was, throwing a tantrum. It was always about me being a little bit like manic. Men were never called any of these words. I never had meetings with women. So the way that I was perceived by men, it was always based on either the way I looked or the way that I behaved. I can't say I walked in as a feminist. I can't say I walked in and I did the right thing for the female race. I have to admit I didn't take on that responsibility.
You're no longer the CEO of Buckaroo today. Why did you decide earlier this year to step down from the top job after, taking the reins of the company, seeing it through such difficult times, riding that new wave with all these new products that were doing really well?
For me, once I started going down this path and this journey of really digging deep and discovering why I was the way I was in the world, the scripts, the way my brain operated in terms of, my past traumas, and again, coming back to the whole idea of growing up around alcoholism and addiction, and the situation I found myself in with my husband, who was in active addiction. I really took a step back and decided that there has to be a different way. And so that kickstarted what was, I guess, an emotional disconnection for me at first with the business. And the emotional disconnection was, life's short. I think there's something else out there for me. I'm holding on to a lot of this because of my dad. And I'm not giving my kids the mum that I think they need and deserve, because I put the business first. And my husband was suffering as a result of me just being the way that I was. But I just didn't have time, and I didn't have any space allowance in my head to be what I wanted to be. And so that emotional disconnect came first. And I said out loud for the first time, I think I want to leave the business. I think I want to look at something else. And then about a month later, I fell pregnant. So it was very much this universe going, okay, yep, you're on the right path. That's what you're going to do. You're having another baby, so quickly get yourself into gear. And I spent about 12 months restructuring the company with the intention of fully restructuring myself out of it.
And given the importance that Buckaroo holds for you and your family, the appointment of a new CEO must have been crucial. How did you decide who could take the reins? Because I imagine you're still a director in the company.
Yeah, correct. So I'm the sole shareholder, and I am still the sole director. And look, nothing really went smoothly, I have to admit. There were people in the business that needed to not be in the business anymore in order for the restructure to work. So that was difficult in itself, knowing how best to, kind of manage those people out, if that was even possible. But really for me, it was about taking my role, breaking it down into compartments and finding professionals to suit each part of that area of understanding. So the CEO role was crucial. And I found a great CEO. Like, she was amazing. Her skill level was so high. She was so enthusiastic. And she just didn't turn up for the job on day one.
What happened?
She just didn't hear from her. I actually, in all honesty, I still don't 100% know. But she didn't turn up. And look, I had someone who was interested in the role, a very trusted person in my life who I had not known for that long, but really appreciated their perspective on things, their business experience, and just who they were as a person. And they'd contacted me shortly before I employed this female CEO. And I said, I'm really sorry, but the job's been taken. Like, the stars just have not aligned. So it would have been a few months after she didn't rock up, gave me a chance to clean some other things, whatever. And then I reached out to this person and I said, hey, are you interested in at least considering it? And 6 months later, they made a huge career change for themselves and they joined Buckaroo.
And how's that transition gone from you to the new CEO?
In my opinion, it's gone really well. I think that any change management piece is going to be difficult. And I think the way that he has actually been able to handle it has been beyond my expectations and given me so much comfort, actually. And one of the main reasons why I continue to emotionally and physically take steps away from that business. So now my only interactions really are with him. I don't visit the business physically anymore. I've created an advisory team to give him further supports, knowing that he needs that. I can't provide him with everything. He's a very skilled person. And I'm really comfortable knowing now that that business is in the right hands and it doesn't have to be family and it doesn't have to be me. And no one tells you that any of what I've done is possible. No one ever said, did you know you can leave your business? Did you know that you don't have to work in it forever? And I think that that's one of the real disappointments that I've had, is just throwing myself 110% into something that I thought it's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I conceded to that and I didn't realise how unhappy it was making me.
So you've gone from somewhat begrudgingly joining your old man's leatherworking business to then becoming the leader, to growing it beyond what it had ever been before, to now stepping down from the CEO role. What's been the biggest takeaway from your long journey with Buckaroo?
I would hope that what comes through for at least with my experience is that the personal journey and the professional journey, like to have them go hand in hand, is actually of real benefit for any business, like for any leader in any organisation. But no one tells you that when you're studying at business school. Like, I didn't do any study, but I'm just saying, no one says, oh, you need to also go on a self-development journey. So no one tells you that when you have those roadblocks in your business, it could actually be that the limitation is you.
That's such good advice. I feel like it's the sort of advice I need to listen to today, because I'm only 2 years into this business and you just constantly feel like this is all on my shoulders. I'm the only one who can drive this thing forward. I'm the only one who can win the work or do whatever it is. But ultimately it's just a story that you've made up for yourself, right?
It is, and it's control. And I mean, you want to feel safe, don't you? Like, you don't want to feel like everything around you is falling down. But it's amazing how we find safety in thinking we have to take it all on, actually, especially as women. It's this massive script that we've had for however many generations, that the way to find safety and security and comfort as a woman is you do it all. And if you don't do it all, then you're a failing mess. And it's just such a sad state of affairs to see a woman how I was, which was super mum, super business person, super this, super that, and not even seeing for myself that I was dead inside. Like, I couldn't see that. So of course no one else was going to see it. But it's just this idea of, you reach a point where, like, I was very quickly going down a path of becoming so mentally unwell, so insane with the way that I was viewing the world, that it was going to unravel really quickly. had I not had the opportunity to save myself. Like, it's just but it's a reality now that I understand is the way that it was for a lot of high achieving people. And I guess that's the path that I'm on now, is breaking that down and understanding this isn't just me. Lots of high achievers out there, lots of driven people have had the same sets of dysfunction as I have had the same sets of trauma, have had the same, roadblocks. This is a very patterned thing that I've experienced. And I had no idea is the other thing. And I don't think they have any idea that others have also experienced what they have and what they are. It's so unspoken about. It's unbelievable.
Well, how much did you struggle with once you decided, I'm trying to please everyone, I'm a people pleaser, I'm a perfectionist, I'm driven, I'm ambition, but there's this whole other part of me that's not being nurtured. But once you step back, you also lose a lot of the labels that you've had for your whole life. So how did you deal with I'm not a big CEO anymore, I'm not running a business? Like, even when you go to the school gate, people go, what do you do? And you suddenly go, I just potter around. Like, how did you deal with that sort of...
Absolutely. It's like stripping naked, and it's so frightening because you're used to having the labels so that you can project a certain perception of yourself out into the world. And then when you strip back and you go, okay, I'm not that anymore, I'm not this anymore, I can't be that anymore. Like, a lot of my world as well, especially growing up as a child, was about lying. I used to lie because I was trying to create this sense of a better place that I could escape to, or I could pretend to be from. And that just perpetuated over time. Like, I'd be lying and I didn't even know I was lying. There's actually a saying which is, let go and hang on. It's this idea that, when you really just stop and you go, okay, I'm just going to let go of the control, let go of the outcomes, let go of the results, let go of the manipulation and the control. The things that come your way are just like unbelievable, and to grow up the way that I did, and to tell a child that, if you let go, all these things will come to you. Oh my God, that would have been terrifying. Like, there is just no way.
I feel like the few times I've tried that, because I have tried that, things haven't come, or something, another setback happens and I go, oh, well, that didn't work, did it? And it's like I haven't given it long enough for it to really work.
I think so, but it's also about how you perceive what that next setback might be, because that setback may actually be the step forward, but you don't recognise it. So it's about letting go and whatever comes your way, accepting it, because eventually it'll steer a new path. It can't be the path that you want, because then you're not letting go.
Yeah,
it has to be the path of its own choosing. Like, we're so obsessed with holding on to our own will and wanting to control all the time. But the idea behind it is that you're letting go in a way that you're doing it not expecting anything to come of it. And then once you do that, and it's true, like I do get asked now what I do, and I do often feel this real burning desire to want to share my backstory. But then when I sit and I say, I'm like a stay-at-home mum, that's bringing me a newfound sense of peace that I've never had before. But that's because the time is right for me now. I never would have been able to have comfortably shared that 3 years ago.
So what is next for you? What makes you happy now?
So now I have stepped out and I'm living what I call my version 2.0 of life. And I've thrown myself into the not-for-profit world, which I find really interesting because I have a for-profit brain. So I really like the challenge of working in a space of which can utilize my skills, but also at the same time I'm giving back to the organizations that I'm a part of, because everything I do is on a volunteer base. So both my husband and I, we do a lot of volunteer work in that side of things. And then I'm very much committed to my healing journey. So I, every day, am focused on what that means for myself and for my children, more importantly, at times, and my husband and just my whole family. That is the focus for me at this particular moment.
Tanya Van Der Water of Buckaroo Belts. Next time on Curveball, you are in for a total treat. I started out in podcasting in 2005, way back before the iPhone was even invented, on a show called Conversations. It was hosted by Richard Fidler. And over the next decade or so, we grew that podcast into one of Australia's biggest. So now that I'm running my own podcast production company, it's all kind of coming full circle. And so I'm joined in the final episode for this series of Curveball by author and ABC broadcaster Richard Fidler.
I remember she gave me my first air check as a presenter, and that air check changed my life. Oh, there you go, there's the curveball moment. There you go, right there. I didn't realise, there it is. That air check changed my life. It's true.
Richard absolutely brings it for this interview. He takes us right back to his early days with the comedy trio, the Doug Anthony All-Stars, to his TV career on Race Around the World, and then into radio and podcasting and now even books. So don't miss that. It's the next episode of Curveball. Curveball's produced by Dead Set Studios. We're a global podcast production company. If you're ever wanting to make a podcast, do reach out. You can find us on email, hello@deadsetstudios.com. This episode was produced by Liam Reardon. The executive producers for Curveball are Rachel Fountain and me. And you can find out more about the show by visiting curveballshow.com.